Well, well, well. Here we are. Another Frederick Bachman book completed. A book series that I wouldn't be surprised if I find myself talking about on this channel at some point, even though I'm completely done it. And that's simply because that series meant a lot to be able to read. Hockey is something that I've always loved, but had a complicated relationship with, and I think that book does a very good job of expressing why those things are really complicated, and to be able to place myself so much into that town was just a really enjoyable read. Even though the topics are really, really hard to read about, I think that it was extremely immersive. And that's one of the first things I noticed about Frederick Bachman. I will stop talking about Beartown because that's not the focus. The focus is My Friends, which he manages to do, again, just in the same ways he did in Beartown. My Friends is Frederick Bachman's most recent release. I think it was just before last summer it came out, I think. Don't be fooled, okay? It's a summer book, but it is very... It covers some very hard topics still, as one would assume a Frederick Bachman book would do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read the blurb for you before we get into my thoughts on it. Most people don't even notice them. Three tiny figures sitting at the end of a long pier in the corner of one of the most famous paintings in the world. Most people think it's just a depiction of a wide expanse of sea. But Louisa, soon to be 18 years old, and an aspiring artist herself, knows otherwise. She is determined to find out the story behind these three enigmatic figures. More than 2 decades before, in a distant seaside town, a group of teenagers find refuge from their bruising home lives by spending long summer days on an abandoned pier telling silly jokes, sharing secrets, and committing small acts of rebellion. These lost souls find in each other a reason to get up every morning, a reason to dream, a reason to love. Out of that summer emerges a transcendent work of art, a painting that, after a chance encounter in an alleyway, will unexpectedly be placed into Louisa's care. She embarks on a surprise-filled cross-country journey to discover how the painting came to be and to decide what to do with it. The closer she gets to the painting's birthplace, the more anxious she becomes about what she'll find. Louisa's complicated life is proof that the happy endings are sometimes possible, but they don't always take the form we expect them to. Frederick Bachman's signature charm, humor, and attention to the poignant details of everyday life are on full display in this funny, moving novel. His most heartfelt and personal tale yet, My Friends, is a stunning testament to the transformative, timeless power of art and friendship. And I think that last sentence really encompasses the way I feel about it and the way I want to start. Obviously, this is a tale about friendship, and friendship on so many levels. Past friendships, how we grow within friendship, and then unexpected friendships as we age, and what ends up bonding people together, and the important role that honesty plays into a friendship and how deep you can get. But before we talk about friendship, I really want to talk about art. This is the other main point in this book, and it's a given. Look at the cover of this, right? It's stunning. Art in this book plays a very big role, specifically art in the form of paintings. I am someone that goes back to art as something that holds a lot of meaning for me in my life. It has more often than not been music or books that I tie myself to. I just feel the most drawn to those things. Sometimes it's movies, and I actually bought my first piece of art, a photograph, and I'm slowly weaseling myself into physical art like that. But music is probably the biggest standstill out of all the art forms for my entire life, and it's something I think about really on an almost everyday scale of just how much it adds to my life. And so Frederick's way of bringing that into this story in the form of a painting and creativity and just the ability to draw, to paint. I related to a lot of his words about how art connects to us in a life and how art becomes the way that we process things. And I think it's a beautiful tale in the way that he told it, in the way that he brings it full circle with our main character, Louisa, carrying around a postcard of her favorite painting with her, and her knowing that this postcard, this painting, means much, much more than it does to a fleeting eye that might see it. It's said time and time again that people who see it and they don't actually see it, just see the sea. But people who see it and know that there's more see the kids, and they see that it's about friendship, it's about love, it's about laughter, it's about holding a space of time that you know that you're not going to be able to keep for the rest of your life. There's this not bittersweet, I guess is the right word, bittersweet nature to this painting, and she sees that. And that's why it becomes such a big piece of her life. And it becomes full circle towards the end of this in the way that he writes, as so many of his stories come full circle in such beautiful ways that if you miss a certain detail about someone, you'll miss the moment it comes full circle. But it's the most charming, beautiful experience when you see it, because it makes you smile from the inside. And that moment happened in this book when we get to the end, and he talks a bit about where these characters end up later on in their life, and talks about how one day Louisa will be the one to paint a picture that ends up being a postcard in another person's hand. It's those very well thought out, constructed storylines that make me love Fredrik Backman's work. Obviously, that and his ability to pull at your heartstrings. Man, does he ever write a character that you love, that is so complex and you just feel so deeply for them. I still think about Benji from Beartown a lot, and in this book I specifically really enjoyed reading about Jor's storyline. I hope that that's how he wanted his name to be said. It's such a beautiful turnaround, because he does set you up this entire book to think that Jor will kill his father. And spoiler alert, I mean, I hope you're watching this because it's a book review and you're just wanting to talk to someone who has also read this book. But I really, really did think that that was going to be what happened throughout the whole book. Maybe I should have thought about it a little bit more and had some foresight to think that he was leading me in that direction just to steer me away from that, because he steered me away from that. Not at all was I expecting George to then take care of his father, but I think he wrote such a wonderful character that had such a fierce, fierce love for his friends, because he knew what it meant to have people in your life that stood up for you, and to have people in your life that loved you to the point where they would do that, because he had the opposite in his father, and then had the good with his mother. And so he took it very, very seriously to care about his friends and love his friends. And there's a moment in specific towards the end of the book where he talks about the fact that he had to just completely ruin his relationship with the artist in order for the artist to leave, and that he had to play a role to make the artist hate him. And it made me feel so deeply sad for him, because ultimately we knew what he was doing. It was just so that the artist would go live the life that he could live and see the world and give back to it in the form of art. In the ways that Jor didn't believe in himself to do those things, he pushed his friends away. And he's such a abrasive character in a good way, but delicate. In those little moments where you actually see into his heart, very, very delicate, especially when you get to the moment where he is trying to nurse the bird back to life with his mother. I just really like when Fredrik Backman writes a character that has to be so tough because of their surroundings, but is so quietly kind and so quietly thoughtful. He's incredibly thoughtful as a character, and I really just really enjoyed it. And I think there's a benefit to, now I haven't read A Man Called Ove, and I haven't read Anxious People, but the stories I have read from him, many of the focuses of the characters are teenagers, and I think that's really intentional, because teenagers have the ability to be emotional and to act out of those feelings, but they also have the ability to be so loving and to live with no boundaries, right? And so they make they make out to be very, very fascinating characters to get to read about and to get to write all the conflicting emotions that are going through them. So that's one thing that I loved about this book. Another thing I loved about this book is the way it goes back and forth between two storylines. Obviously, we're learning about the current day, that is Louisa and Ted, as they mostly are on a train and going back to Ted's hometown to try and deal with the painting in whichever way Louisa wants to deal with it. But we're also at that same time placed as Louisa almost is. Like, we are her character and we're learning about this friendship group chapter by chapter and all the little stories. And I think that a book like that, to be immersed in both storylines, I don't think it's actually the easiest thing that some people might think it would be to write a story like that. It's the same thing when you get to a TV show, right? And there's multiple characters and they all have their own storylines and it switches back and forth. Like, typically there's a time where you're like, I don't really care about what's happening to this story. I don't really care about what's happening in your life, respectfully. In this book, he manages to make you care about both. And I noticed he does it in this beautiful way that actually plays on the sea, which is a very big part of this book artistically and creatively and emotionally. It's as if it's the tides of the waves pulling in and pushing back out as you get tidbits of the past lives that add up more and more and more into understanding this friendship group, this old friendship group. And it's just a beautiful way to tell the story and to wrap it all into one. I think that at the bottom of this book is the sea and art, and that gets pulled through. Like, this is interesting, huh? All the way up into the friendships, and he uses both of those things in his writing style to better add to the story, and it just makes it a great book. I mean, it just is a great way of writing, and that he does. Another thing Fredrik Backman loves to do is a foreshadow. I don't think you could ever take this skill away from this man. He loves this so much, and I learned that very clearly in Beartown, and I learned it again very early on in this book when he foreshadowed, or so I thought he foreshadowed, the death of Jorah's father. But that did not happen, and I, like I said, should have known better. Because he likes to set a path for you and then all of a sudden rip it away, and you were completely wrong. And he did do that in this book, and I did fall for it. I did, and I fell for it many times. I maybe should learn my lesson. But it does make for a great storyline. I think that's probably what makes you really attached to the characters, is he tells you something so beautiful about them, and then he says something like, and that will be the last time they all swim together. And you're like, what? And your heart breaks for them. And he really loves to do that to you. So that's your warning, which actually leads me into one thought. If you go to read this book, which hopefully you have read this book if you're this far into the video, because I spoiled a lot of things, but if you haven't, read the warnings before you read this book. There's a lot of hard conversations in this book. It's one of the things that makes it very emotional and very, adds such depth to read it, but it is something that you should look into if you're thinking about reading this book. A couple random notes of things that I just loved. I loved the taxi driver side character. She was hilarious. I also cried at the storyline with Christian. That was the one that got the tears going for me. It's weird because there's so many sad things that happen in this book, and his piece in this wasn't such a big role, but I think it was just envisioning what the artist was going through in that moment of their life, and to lose someone like that who encouraged him when he really needed it. I was like, this is like, why would you do this? This is the most heartbreaking thing in the entire world. But tying in Christian's mother throughout the story and bringing her back towards the end was such a beautiful use of her character and world building, which is the skill of Fredrik Backman. I think that's the first thing I really, really picked up when I read the Beartown series, was that I realized, 100 pages in, This guy has named like 40 characters, and I could tell you who everyone is and what their role in the story is. And to me, I was surprised I could do that. And I give the credit to Fredrik Backman, not to myself. And he continued to do this again in this book. He just has a way of building out the personality of a character so well that for each and every one, there's something that sticks out about them that you're able to remember them by. My last and final thing I wanted to talk about this book was one sentence I noticed gets repeated throughout the entire thing as kind of the cap of a paragraph or a moment or a lesson that they hope that you remember. And that is the phrase, "How lucky she was," or "How lucky he was," or "How lucky they are." It's this small detail that is really important to take note of, because quite often when he used it, it would be after a moment where he's talking about someone who doesn't have a lot, but as soon as they have the smallest sliver of something, how lucky they are. And I think those small moments in this book, because it's repeated so many times, become one of the really big lessons that I think Fredrik hopes that we take out of this book, especially given that these characters are ones that did not have a lot, that they choose to really, really care, to really, really fight, to really, really love the things that they do. And it's a great reminder to anyone who reads this book that those small things, if you give them the credit they deserve by caring for them, loving for them, they will become very, very big things in your life. And that sense is really important in carrying you through. It just goes to show you don't need a lot. You just need someone to believe in you. That belief goes further than money. That belief goes further than dreams. And that act of belief within friendship and honesty within friendship is what carries all these characters throughout their life. And I think it's a beautiful testament to our lives and what we can carry in, and what we can carry into our friendships, and also just how we treat everyone and how we see the world ourselves. So before I finish, I probably have 40 pictures of different passages I've taken pictures of in this book because I didn't have my tabs with me, so again, I'm taking pictures on my phone. I'm not going to read 40 of them, but I am going to read some of them because it's a good way to have a documentation of the moments that I really loved and to give you a glimpse into what this book has to offer you. Okay, I'm starting off really intense, but I promise I'll find something that's really nice. This is the first picture I took of this book, and this is 14 pages in, so I'll give you really a glimpse into what you're getting into. A child's brain is peculiar. It interprets everything in its own way. Louisa had always dreamed of this, but what the police officer said was incomprehensible. Fish had to explain, inform the relatives, meant that you told the people who cared. So Louisa was the relative. Deceased meant dead. Substance abuse meant her mother had drunk herself to death, drowned from the inside. A child's brain is so imaginative. Louisa heard this, but didn't grow up afraid of alcohol, just horribly afraid of swimming. And obviously this is a paragraph that's good for so many reasons in terms of his writing ability, but the one that really sticks out to me that he uses so often is, like I said, circling back. He begins with, a child's brain is so peculiar. And then to finish the statement he wants to make, he says, a child's brain is so imaginative. And it's just this ability to give us a glimpse into her personality in such a creative way. Well, personality. This in particular is trauma, but the way that her brain works, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, so that you understand this character more. It's such a creative way of telling it to us through such a lens of care, because you can tell how much time he takes to write the characters that he does and the perspective that he wants to set you up to see them as. One with understanding and empathy, and that they're complicated. And I just think that that paragraph is a great testament to a lot of the work that he does and a lot of the writing structure he follows throughout his work. Here's a really quick quote about what art meant in this book. Art is what can't fit inside a person, the things that bubble over. And one more thing about art quickly. But I don't think the most important thing for an artist is being able to draw, but having something to say. Which reminded me so much of the quote by Rick Rubin about the fact that the artist's ability is not what they create, but the way that they live in the world and the way that they see the world. And I think this book, if you like a quote like that, is basically a testament to that entire thing, that it's not what you create, it's how you choose to see the world, and then how because of that, how you end up creating things, if that makes any sense at all. In conclusion of today's episode, I said it in the TikTok I made, but I think what makes Fredrik Backman good is not what he says, but what he doesn't say. Because he sets up these sentences that when you read them, I don't know how to explain it. He says so little with the words on the page, but he says so much with the space in between them in terms of that storyline. And I know that just sounds like creative, like mumble jumble that I'm saying right now, but I think you'll know exactly what I'm saying if you read this book or have read a Fredrik Backman book. And I will 100% be reading A Man Called Ove and Anxious People, because I know there are other really big ones from him. Just unfortunately not right now, because I need to get through an entire library collection that I already own in a month and a half. It's like turning into less than a month and a half now, and soon to be just a month. So we're running out of time. And I'm gonna go ahead and pick my next book, but with that, this was My Friends by Fredrik Backman, and I will see you soon.